This week in Arsenal, the Gunners lose at home to Villa and cede control of the Premier League title race. Arsenal fall to Bayern in the Champions League quarterfinals. Squad management comes back to haunt Mikel Arteta once again, and a flurry of player links emerge in the aftermath. Let's get into it.
Now I'm not going to mess up the intro.
Maybe we'll have a good surprise for you.
Welcome in to episode 52 of This Week in Arsenal. As always, I'm Sham. You can follow me on Twitter at Shamsdale. And I'm joined as ever by Sash, who you can follow at LT Arsenal. Sash, it's been a rough week, my friend. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing all right actually. I think we spoke earlier on in the season, that let's just try to enjoy it, the good times, the bad times. And more often than not, in April, we always have some bad times. There's always like this one week where it seems like we mess everything up and the season is over. But having said that, despite the results of this week, the Premier League title race is still very much on. Okay. Like, I don't want the players to have the mentality the fans have and give up because they're just 2 points behind first, They're just 2 points behind first. And let's assume another script, okay? Let's assume that we didn't play in the Champions League. Let's assume that we came back. So let's assume we were like 15 points off first going into the new year. And we are back in it, and we're now just 2 points behind the league leaders. If that were the case, we would say, hey, we're right in it. The reason we are saying, oh, it's over, is because we have lost 2 games on the trot, and history tells us that we normally go on to capitulate. That's why people are giving up. But this is where I want to see something different from the players and just put these two results behind you. Okay. Go ahead into the next match. It's a new game. Just view it as 6 games to finish the season. Just aim to play the best 6 games of your lives, right? And then see what happens. Because I do think City might drop points in at least one game. I think so. I think City will drop points in one. The question is, will we also drop points, right? Because we have some difficult fixtures coming. We have Spurs away, we have United away. Even Wolves away this weekend is a bit tricky. Chelsea, even though we're playing at the Emirates, you never know with Chelsea what you're going to get. So we have some droppable games in terms of points. But what I want is the players to go out there and play the best 6 games of their lives, okay? Because this is a big chance to win the Premier League. If at the start of the season you were offered the situation to be 2 points behind first in April, you would take it, right? Anyone would take it logically. And right now we should not let the recency affect the bigger picture. That's really important because last season, the moment things started to get south, you saw what happened. We dropped points at Anfield. We dropped points then against West Ham, then Southampton, then against City. Then the season was done. But even after City, we lost to Brighton, we lost to Forest. So, to be honest, we were not so far off from winning the title last season, but we dropped points in so many games. It's almost as if we started to feel sorry for ourselves. And that's what I don't want to see from us this season. So yes, you asked me how I am. I think I'm doing okay. I'm excited to see how the players respond after these defeats. Can we get the result back this weekend? And I think the players have to think positively. I hope the players don't read social media. Just focus on your game. You've done really well the second half of the season. You've done very well in 2024. You've lost 2 matches in 2024, one Villa at home, which can happen after like 8 games or 9 games in the league that you won in the year. You then have we lost against Bayern at Allianz Arena. That can happen to anyone. So, okay, it's not ideal, but let's put it aside and let's focus on the 6 games. And that's what I want to see. And let's see if the players can get back into it this week, Sham. But what did you make of it? How are you doing otherwise, mate?
Yeah. Look, it's never fun to go out of the Champions League, especially against Bayern, right? Um, I'll, y- y- I think a lot of the reactions have been very black or white. You know, I think it's either been a large portion of the fans who are saying this is mediocre, the club is finished, everything needs to be burned down from top to bottom, um, which I don't think is correct. And then you have a bunch of people kind of saying, um, basically like this is great, and we should be happy with this, and why is everyone so upset? And while I do lean closer to that second side, I I am disappointed, because we came up against a Bayern that was missing Gnabry and Davis and Coman, Leroy Sané. There's a bunch of reports coming out right now that Leroy Sané was playing through a lot of pain, was not at 100%, and I think they were missing Pavlovic as well. Definitely for the first leg. I think he was on the bench for the second leg.
Yeah.
Manuel Neuer was playing with something. So this wasn't a full strength Bayern. And on the other hand, we basically had all our players back with the exception of Yuri and Timber. And we've been saying for weeks, you have to rotate. You have to make sure that in the critical games your key players can actually perform. And we will have a discussion about that in terms of what we got wrong there. But on the other side, right? I think you're absolutely right. This was our first time back in the Champions League after 7 years. We made the quarterfinals, and I will admit we weren't exactly convincing, against Porto. We weren't exactly great against Bayern. We had moments against Bayern, but we weren't totally convincing there either. So it's nice to see us get into the quarterfinals and not go out completely sad against a Bayern team that, for all the banter that's been flying around about them, are still a very good side and have some killers, and that's another thing I want to discuss, later on. So I'm disappointed, but I can accept it, right? And the key for me now, I want to see two things from this Arsenal side moving forward. One, like you said, we're 2 points behind in the title race, and City could very well win their last 6 games of the season in the league, and this is a pretty pointless discussion. But I don't think that's going to be the case. They still have, I think.
I don't know if it's my internet or Sham's internet connection, but seems like there has been a discussion. There's been a disconnection. We will just wait for Sham to get back. Well, so Sham's laptop has died, so that's why he got disconnected. We will wait for him to come back. But in the meantime, let's just get through the game that happened yesterday. I thought the first half was really good, to be honest. It was a game of chess. I think Arsenal took the initiative. Bayern, they told us how we're going to play before the game started. Tuchel did tell us all that Arteta was going to play a certain way. We're going to build up using the right hand side and look to finish on the left. I think we were a little bit naive, maybe not to tweak a few things. But having said that, the first half was good. I thought our press was very good. We pressed Bayern really high, and I think we caused them a few problems. Bayern also had some moments, but I thought the first half we edged it. And we could have gone into halftime pretty happy with how we played because in recent times against Bayern, it has not ended well. So from my point of view, I think the first half went well. Second half, we did start good. I think right from the start of the second half, just like the Villa game, it was very like poor from us. We had nothing in our play. We had no intention, even off the ball. I can't say it was fatigue. I think it's a bit more than just saying it's fatigue. Um, I think personally that there's more to it because when it happens against Villa after we have a good half and then against Bayern in the second half, I just think that we are not coming out of the blocks quick enough, to be honest. There's one coach in the other team that seems to get the message across at halftime, and we seem to like just suffer a bit, take some time to get into the groove. And once the momentum is with the opposition in the second half, it just goes downhill from there. Bayern created a lot of chances, and yeah, fair play to them because they dominated that second half and completely deserved to win the game, deserved to win the leg as well. And they missed some chances, like they hit the post. So I think all in all, we have to say that it was a pretty fair result in the end. But now Sham is back. So Sham, please, I had to cover for you. I didn't know what to say because you were in a really good flow and I was just listening to you and all of a sudden, boom. So I was just wondering what to say and I was just discussing about the game. But please feel free to take the stage again and continue.
Yeah, kind of like how our season went, to be honest. Yeah, I need to get a new laptop, by the way. It did this really cool thing where I had it plugged in charging and it still was losing battery, which is not a great sign. Anyway, yeah, I think there needs to be some perspective about what happened, right? This is a team that was in the Champions League for the first time, aside from Odegaard and Havertz and Jorginho, and Jesus and Zinchenko. Most of those guys had never really played in the Champions League ahead of that time. Arteta, this is his first time coaching in the Champions League. For a lot of those players, that was their first time playing in the Allianz Arena. So, it is an opportunity that we missed. We definitely played a little bit too cautiously. We definitely didn't we didn't grab them by the throat when the opportunity was there. But like you said, we have a Premier League to focus on now, and we just have to win our last 6 games and see what happens there. So, um, I people aren't gonna love hearing this, but I am proud of the team in a way because we didn't go to Bayern Munich and get the brakes beaten off of us in front of everybody at a critical moment. Um, so yeah, that's about where I am with things right now. But still kind of mourning what could have been.
Yeah, yeah, no, 100%. I think some perspective is important. I think criticism is absolutely justified for yesterday, by the way. Like, as I mentioned, I thought we were naive with our approach. It seemed like we just play the same way. This is not a Premier League game, this is a one off Champions League game in Europe. The dynamic is so different. Even a team like Porto, who are not amazing on paper, you saw what they did when they came to the Emirates. Like, Arsenal hardly created chances in that game. It was a tight affair, and that's how it's going to be in Europe. Coaches that will set up for that one individual game. And what I find is that in Europe, the transition game always seems to win in the end. I think that's why Real Madrid are so successful because they have found that balance between a bit of possession and control along with being a team that on the counter can be absolutely lethal. So yesterday I felt the way we played most teams would be very happy playing against a team like that, because we kept the ball, we didn't do too much with it, we were a bit conservative, a bit tentative, and the moment we lost the ball, we looked a bit afraid when Bayern got it and looked to counter. We were not usually we defend that very well, to be honest, the opposition transitions. But in the Champions League, we saw against Porto at times and against Bayern as well, we have not defended it well enough. I think there are some reasons for that, some of it personal. So I think Jorginho in the middle, I'm a huge fan of Jorginho, but I think off the ball in transition, he is not someone you want in midfield. I would rather have Declan Rice there, but the problem is, if you have Declan Rice there, who's going to play at in the on the left central midfield? We don't have any player for that position since Xhaka left. So it's a really tough one, and I just think in the circumstances, I think we could have tweaked our approach a little bit and been a bit proactive. So that is my only criticism that I have. But as you mentioned, we didn't get destroyed or something. We lost with some level of grace. It was 1-0. I think in the last 5 minutes of the match, we were at least better and we at least had some threat. It's not like in the past where Bayern would just run away with it. And it's so embarrassing that the last three times we faced Bayern before this round of this quarterfinal tie, we lost 5-1 in all the three games. So yeah, I think I'm not happy losing. I'm critical of the manager after the game yesterday. I'm a bit critical of some of the players as well. But all in all, I think, bit of perspective is needed, Sham. So yeah, I'm not going to have a huge meltdown over this. We take it on the chin and move forward.
I will say, in terms of criticisms that we do have, you said that we don't have anyone who could play at that left center mid position. You're right, and I agree and I disagree, right? Because we did have people we could have played there, right? Smith Rowe has featured recently.
At Allianz,
Fabio,
I want to play him there. I think it will be so
I
open.
mean, but we were losing at that point. You gotta try something.
No, in the second half, yes, but I meant to start the game.
Oh no, not to start the game. I agreed with the lineup to start the game, but what really ticked me off is that once we went behind, we just kind of did this same thing, and we've seen Arteta do this a few times, where things don't go according to plan, and then it's just I'm going to throw on Jesus and Trossard, and like maybe the another guy on the bench who like I feel good about that week, and I'm gonna see what happens. But I couldn't help but think to myself, why aren't you putting on Smith Rowe? Why aren't you putting on Vieira? Party, I understand, because frankly, I think Party has looked physically washed since he's quote unquote come back. I don't think he's actually come back really.
He's come back many times, to be honest, this season.
Yeah, I hate to break this to a lot of people, but I don't think that the Thomas Party that a lot of people think about, I think that guy's gone. We left that guy at the beginning of the 22-23 season. But yeah, it's just, we needed some creative spark, and he just brought on two players who, they're good and they can make an impact, but Bayern were supremely prepared for them, right? And they put on Kim Min-jae and they put on Upamecano and they parked the bus, which I guess is some sign of respect, right? They have Bayern parking the bus against you at home. But yeah, I question some of the decisions Arteta made in crunch time in terms of his personnel. And I guess that kind of leads me to maybe the first thing I want to talk about in terms of what went wrong leading up to this moment, and that's our squad management and our squad composition, right? And I agree with Ryan here. I think in relation to this, Martinelli has been a very let's call him mercurial figure this season, right? Where he's just not been involved. There was, there's so many different statistics I could pull from my head, but I saw this chart that was shared by this one account a couple months ago, talking about each
each player from each Premier League team who is most isolated in that team. And Martinelli, out of all those guys, right? So basically the 20 most isolated players in the Premier League, Martinelli was second. And then if you look at pass maps for our, I mean, go to any game you want, really. If you look at those pass maps, Martinelli is all the way off in a corner by himself. And I understand the game plan is to kind of play on the right hand side and then switch it to the left quickly and get Martinelli into 1v1 situations. But the problem is, statistically speaking, we're like 16th or 17th in the league in terms of switches. So we're not even deploying him the way that we should if we're going to play that way. So I think Vieira is a guy that we should have been looking at more often to unlock Martinelli. But yeah, I just with all that in mind, I just kind of want to get your thoughts in terms of our squad composition and our squad usage over these last few weeks, and whether or not mistakes have been made.
It's hard to say, because I think everything has a cost attached to it. So if you rotate a lot, there is a chance that due to the lack of stability, you drop points in the odd game. But if you don't rotate, there's a chance that in the future, when you need your squad players, they're not ready to come in and play, which has been the case in the last few seasons. So I'm not going to just criticize Arteta in this regard, because I think there's more to it. Like people, I myself have always been an advocate of using the squad. I think the reason City they're so successful is due to how they use their squad. A lot of people they play fantasy Premier League. You can never really pick a Man City player because Pep will always do something different. And the fact that they're able to maintain their level despite all the changes they make, I think is testament to how good a manager Pep Guardiola is. And also, I think it's testament to how good Man City are in terms of the players that they have. But I think in Arsenal's case, some of the squad players, they are either not at the level to straight away come in and do it, or they're a bit inexperienced, and there's always a risk associated with throwing them in to like a big stage. So for example, I think Fabio Vieira could have come on yesterday against Bayern, but I don't know if he's ready to come in at the Allianz Arena and grab the game by the scruff of the neck and make a difference. I think he's shown in some games that, yeah, he has a really good final ball in him. But there's also been some other games where he's been a total non-entity after coming on. So you're a bit unsure what you're going to get. And I'm a huge fan of Fabio Vieira. And as Litney says here, why has Vieira disappeared? I agree. I think Vieira should have been given more chances as the season went on. But it's not like Man City, where sometimes you will see Bernardo Silva sitting on the bench and then he would come in and play. It's not like that. Like Odegaard to Vieira is still, I think, has the potential at least to be a huge drop off. So you need to be a bit careful with how you use your squad players also. And I think the solution is yes, build a better squad, a bigger squad. And I think that's what the summer is about. And I see a lot of fans, they're saying that, oh, Arteta, we're plateauing. He's never going to win us the league, blah, blah, blah. But just remember one thing, right? I think the day I will give up on Arteta is when I look at the Arsenal squad and I see this team is incredible. It really has no big holes in it. And I think a new manager should come and do it. But if you look at the squad, you can clearly say, okay, striker, definitely we need a better player there. Winger depth, like we need a player with Martinelli's pace, because if Martinelli doesn't play, we don't have anyone who can make those sort of runs in behind and offer that type of intensity. So we need someone else with that pace. And that's why Mikel also went in for Mudrik a couple of years ago. So we need a player with pace. We need a left central midfielder because currently we don't have anyone in that position since Xhaka left. We could do with a centre back. I think that's still a bit more of a luxury. But when you look at the starting 11 and you say, okay, there's 2 to 3 positions in key areas that we really need a good player there, I view it as a positive thing because we're already at a stage where we're almost like winning these big trophies. and you can clearly tell that, okay, this is where we have to improve, So that's why I don't want to be too critical of Arteta, because I still don't think we are at the level of Europe's elite in terms of experience and also in terms of quality. That's what I believe. I think we're very close, but we're not there yet. So, yeah, all in all, I think, yeah, we can just view the game as a learning and move forward with it. And yeah, as I mentioned, make sure we don't slip going forward in over the next 6 games.
Yeah, I do think you make a good point in terms of players not being ready, and also what we're missing in the squad. And I think those are kind of the two things that I learned from this match, right? The first being that, you know, I guess let's do this transitively, right? Where you watch the players and they looked gassed, absolutely cooked at the end of the second half, right? And it's very similar to what happened against Villa, by the way, right? We had a game plan, failed to execute in the first half. The opposing team came out in the second half, adjusted slightly, and we just did not have the physical levels to compete with them anymore, and we dropped off. Our press got beaten. We didn't win the duels anymore, and people didn't pick up their defensive assignments, and we eventually lost both those games, right? So when you watch, your important players run out of energy in such a big game, that means that typically that they've been overplayed to some extent, right? And Scott Willis from Crab Stats put out this chart kind of showing uh, basically what he did is he took each player from City, Liverpool, and Arsenal and ranked them in terms of the percentages of the total available minutes that they had played, right? And then kind of did a line graph for each. So if you look at Arsenal's and City's top 8 most played players, our top 8 have played a decent like 10 to 11% more minutes than City's top 8, right? Which tells you that we've overworked them a little bit. And so when that happens, you kind of, and we've seen this with Arteta 2 seasons in a row, that typically means that we're not trusting players on the bench. We're not rotating. We're not making use of squad players when perhaps we're in situations they could be effective in. Um, and then, that kind of leads me to look at the squad. And, Smith Rowe, Vieira, 2 guys already brought up. It doesn't seem that he trusts them at all. Maybe, because they both have been injured throughout this season. Maybe they're just coming back from that party. Like I said, yeah, he spent most of the season out, but I just think he's kind of done as well. Reece Nelson, I don't know why we extended Reece Nelson at this point. We paid him $100,000 just to sit on the bench. That guy's played less minutes than Aaron Ramsdale has this season, which is crazy.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So it's so you have to ask yourself, why aren't these guys playing? And I still trust Arteta's player ID enough to say to myself, well, if Arteta doesn't think these guys are ready, right, or if Arteta doesn't think these guys can contribute, then why do we still have them, right? And of course, we live in the PSR player sustainability rules era where you can't just get rid of guys and then go buy each of the replacements for £40 million. I understand that, right? I understand that Juventus doesn't want to sign Thomas Partey for more than a Twix bar and a handshake, right? But at some point, we have to stop kicking the can down the road, and we've done this since Wolves wanted to give us £20 million for Ainsley Maitland-Niles, and we kept them, and that decision didn't pay off, and we ended up having to let him go for free. So, I think we need to get way better at making those decisions with players and just failing fast if we don't think that they're 100% at the level that we need them to be. And then kind of the flip side of that, yeah, we do, we're missing stuff on the pitch, we're missing key players. There was a big uproar about Zinchenko from the Villa game, and you and I are both not thrilled with him. But but it's the problem is, because I think Zinchenko is a good player, but the problem is you have to get the balance around him right, right? Like if you play Zinchenko, you need Rice at 6. But if Rice is at 6, who do you play at 8? Right? You can't play Jorginho there.
I
You
will
can't play
just
Smith.
say, I will
Yeah.
just say, if Zinchenko's playing, we need 12 players on the pitch, just one player to compensate for all his mistakes during the game. But yeah.
Yeah, and it's just like I feel bad for the guy after a certain point because we're not putting him in a position to succeed. And yeah, if someone comes in with a 35, 40, 45 million pound bid for Zinchenko, I say take the money and run. But at the same time, the guy does have his uses. You just have to build the team around him. But
His uses are Sheffield home, Luton home. These are the kinds of games he plays well, and these are the
yeah,
kinds of games you can technically win even without him. In all honesty,
no, yeah. Well, that's the thing. It's about matchups, right? It's about like taking into account who you're coming up against. I said after the City game that I only want Zinchenko to start in two more games for the rest of the season: Everton and United, right? And then someone responded to me, "What if he gets beat by Anthony?" And I was like, "If Zinchenko gets scored on by Anthony a second time, then he needs to go."
yeah, it's already
Right?
happened once, and
It
last time
happened once, yeah.
we let it slip because okay, we were competing for top four, we were first. You're like, okay, it is what it is. But now, we're at a stage where we have to win, and it's like, yeah, these bad habits
But
cannot be tolerated anymore.
yeah, but like to my point there is that like we don't have that player in like playing at left 8 that allows you to play Zinchenko, unfortunately, right? So like there's no one who's gonna take up that defensive burden. I guess you could get clever, right? And you could play Tomiyasu right back, and you could play White at defensive mid, and then you can play Rice at left 8. But it's just really convoluted at that point, right? So you don't have the pieces there. So we need a two-way left 8 in any event, right? And not just for when Zinchenko plays. But on top of that, and this has been another recurring theme throughout the season, we do not have any pace in this team outside of Martinelli, right? As soon as Martinelli came off the pitch, Bayern moved up a little bit because they knew that we weren't going to get in behind them, and a lot of teams do that when Martinelli's not playing.
Yeah, and this just brings me to one point. You mentioned this. Why
Mhm.
is Arteta so predictable with his in-game management? Like, is it a rule that every time in the 70th minute it has to be Trossard on for Martinelli? Like, why doesn't he do something different? Like, I don't first of all get why he had to bring Eddie on. I would have just put Martinelli up front. He would have pressed, he would have offered something in behind. And yeah, sure, bring Trossard because Trossard can score if he gets that chance. He's one of the best ball strikers in the team. So I don't have anything against Trossard coming on. But why is it that we don't see something different, like a change in attacking shape? Why is it that it's always so pre-programmed? And it's quite clear to me that Arteta also has his favorites. Like there are some players who would never come off. Like Kai Havertz, I don't think he was great yesterday, but he always seems to stay on the pitch for 90 minutes no matter how he plays. And we had a comment um earlier about like Vieira, why he's disappeared, which I had touched upon before. But it's like Vieira has one not so good game against Everton, it was, and then he's out of the team. Like it seems to me like there's a bit of lack of consistency with how some players are viewed. And look, I think no manager is perfectly objective. I think every manager has their favorites and what they want from a player, which is fine. But I do think in terms of in-game management, like we make a lot of like predictable decisions. Like Trossard on for Martinelli. Yes, it worked in the first leg because Trossard scored. But I don't think once Trossard came on for Martinelli, Arsenal were like some different side. I think yes, Gabriel Jesus moving to center forward, Havertz moving to midfield. That's the sort of change that I would like to see. Like change things up a bit, change the dynamic. Don't make the same predictable substitutions every single time. Like I can tell you the substitutions Arteta is going to make this weekend. I can tell you the minute he's going to make those substitutions as well. And look, I'm a big fan of Arteta. I think he's done phenomenally well for the club. But it's not that we're just going to sit here and blindly defend everything. Like, in my view, he is a pretty boring and rigid manager at times. Like, he's a bit stubborn in his ways. And look, I think all great people are stubborn, right? Like, you have to really believe in what you're doing and have that consistency when the world is telling you something different. But still, yesterday we could have been more innovative yesterday with how we did the substitutions. I would have put Martinelli up front next to maybe Gabriel Jesus. I might have taken Havertz off, brought on Trossard, or I might have even have taken off someone else. Maybe even Rice, because we really had to go full throttle for the goal. So I would have tried to change things up a bit and do something different, be more dynamic in how we do it. But yeah, we're really, really predictable. And that's what is the annoying part for me, because it's almost as if Tuchel, obviously Bayern have been out of the Bundesliga for a while. It's almost as if he's just spent all his waking hours just planning for this one game. He told us before the game, Arsenal, they're going to build up on their right hand side, blah, 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 blah. And I know you said that Bayern sat back, and that's maybe testament to how far we have come. I think that's partly true. But I also think Bayern sat back because that was their game plan, because they wanted to see how they can hurt Arsenal the most. And I think the way they played, I think in the first half, they sat back. In the second half, when Arsenal actually used up a lot of energy in the first half with all that press, second half slightly tired, coming off a defeat against Villa. Bayern conserving a bit of energy in the first half. Second half, they're all over us. They get the goal, they win the game. And yeah, I think over the two legs, they deserve to win. And for me, that's the annoying thing, because again, it's predictable. The way we play is predictable. And yeah, the substitutions, man, it's really annoying to me. And this is something that, yeah, I would like for Arteta to get much, much better at. But what do you think? Do you think that this is something that he has to like improve upon? It's obviously something very hard to judge, substitutions. It's more like, as fans, we want to see something different. It's hard to really quantify that substitutes that he makes are bad, because they make a difference, they score. But I guess it's more the timing of it and the rigidity of it, which makes us, I think, a little predictable. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, to your point, your substitutions are going to be a little predictable when there's only like two or three guys on the bench you actually trust, right? So if it's only Jesus and Trossard, and Nketiah, because he trains well, that you really want to put on the pitch, then you can only do so many things at that point. So I think it just kind of comes down to his use of resources. And I'll preface by saying this. I still very much believe in Mikel Arteta, right? I still very much back him. I'm not at a point where I'm giving up. I'm certainly not at a point where I think Emery or anyone else could have, done a better job from our past. But I think the key goal for any manager is to maximize their resources, right? And Arteta, as good of a coach he is, right? And make no mistake about it, I think he's an elite tactical mind. Players are raving about him left and right. He's not the most effective manager, right? He doesn't maximize his resources. So it just kind of all goes back to, you need to make some decisions on these guys in the summer, right? If you don't think Smith Rowe and Vieira are guys that you can call on in the 83rd minute against Bayern Munich when you need a goal, sell them. If you think that Thomas Partey is done physically and can't come in and play six and give us that verticality and give us that mobility in midfield, sell him, right? If you think Reece Nelson is not good enough to play more than like 300 minutes over the course of the season, and is not good enough to take some minutes off of Martinelli and take some minutes especially off of Saka, then sell him, right? All these guys, I'm not saying that they're going to fetch massive fees, but all those guys can get you at the very least 15, 20 million, right? Maybe Partey's a little lower because of his age, but I think this summer it's really incumbent on Arsenal to start making some very big decisions with some of the players that we've been carrying recently, because it's just too big a burden. It's too big a burden to put on guys like Saka and Odegaard and Rice. I've never seen Rice look tired, and Rice was puffing yesterday,
Gareth
right?
Southgate, when I catch you.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks for thanks for playing him in 180 useless minutes. Even White's been playing through a knee injury this season, and to a certain extent, I do agree with Arteta when he says that players have to be prepared to play three games a week or a game every 3 days or whatever. But the I'm struggling to remember the stat exactly, but there's a pretty damning stat going around that kind of covers the number of players we've had who've you know what it is? I think it's the number of players we have who've played 40 who've started 40 plus games, and I think we have 8. The City have none, right? Which I think tells you everything you need to know.
Yeah.
So you can have guys you trust, you can have favorites. That's I really don't care as long as you're winning. But at the end of the day, you need to have enough of a squad where your most important players are going to be able to perform at their best in critical moments. And it feels like we've been saying that for 2-3 years in a row now, and we haven't learned from it. So if we want to progress as a team, we need to do two things. One, we need to make these big calls with the squad players, and we need to go get guys who can contribute. We need to go get guys who, in the quarterfinals and the semifinals of the Champions League, in a Premier League title deciding match away at the Etihad or away at Anfield or wherever. You need to go get guys who can come off the bench and make an impact, and guys who aren't going to be injured all the time, right? And guys who aren't going to be below the level sometimes, and then maybe I'll give him 15 minutes against no, right? Get people you trust. That's the first thing. The second thing, we need game breaking talent, especially offensively, right? And I think we do have players who have that individual quality, right? Like Saka and Odegaard. I think on a defensive standpoint, Rice and Saliba and Gabriel, definitely. But those three aren't going to win you a game. Saka and Odegaard aren't going to win you a game if they're playing 35, 3,600 minutes by the time we hit April, right? And Martinelli, who I also think has that in him, isn't being put in a position to succeed currently. So we need to go sign players with pace, players with that top line offensive quality. Just look at Bayern. Again, Bayern have not had a good season by their standards. I don't think they're terrible or anything. I just think this Bayer Leverkusen team are crazy. But look at Bayern. They have Gnabry. Okay, Gnabry can't play, then they have Sane. Okay, Sane has to come off because he's playing through something. They have Coman, right?
And
None
if
of those
Roman
guys.
is injured, they have Tell, who's a huge talent, by the way. I think
Yeah.
in 2-3 years' time, people are going to be speaking about Tell as like one of the best wingers in the world. I think he is that good, and people have not seen enough of him, and we didn't really see much of him in over the 2 legs. But he's a brilliant player.
I think it was a kindness that Tuchel did to not bring on Tell at the end of the game, because I was really worried about that 1-0 down. I was like, is he going to put on Muller now and Tell when we're tired, and is he going to beat us like at least 3-0 in front of everybody? Instead, he decided to go the defensive route, which I appreciate. But if those guys can't do it, if Tell isn't called upon, they still have Musiala and they still have Kane. They still have Kimmich, who can ghost into the penalty box and put in a bullet header to win you the game. They have all of this elite talent that when the chips are down, when Plan A isn't working, when you need someone to grab the game by the balls and make something happen, one of them is going to do it, and we just don't have enough of those players, right? And in the Premier League, I think we've shown that it's not a massive issue, right? In the Champions League, it's a problem.
Yeah.
And that was something I kind of felt watching the Tuesday games. Especially PSG, um, where they Barcelona went ahead, and sure it took Ronald Araujo to make a terrible boneheaded decision, but Mbappe and Dembele and Vitinha, right, and Bradley Barcolo, like those guys picked it up and took it to the next level and found those goals and those created those dangerous situations for them to score, and we just don't have guys who are going to do that. And maybe that's a system thing. Quite frankly, I don't really think it is. I think Arteta is willing to kind of give players the space to express themselves a little in the final third. Not to like a Wenger-esque extent, but I think if we had Mbappe, Arteta's not suddenly going to get mad that Mbappe's cutting in on his right and taking shots if they're flying into the back of the net. You know what I mean? But yeah, I think those are the two things that we really have to address. And just to all the people who are frustrated about kind of how the last few seasons have gone, and it feels like every time we get to April, things collapse. I just want to make 2 points. One, that happens to everybody who doesn't win a trophy, right? That happens to every team that doesn't win the Champions League or doesn't win the Premier League or the FA Cup or whatever. But the second thing is these are extremely valuable lessons to learn, right? Because they teach you what you need to do to get a little bit better. And I think so far the last couple of years have shown us we have a manager and we have a team who, they will learn from this and they'll come back a little bit more settled, a little bit more confident, a little bit more experienced, and hopefully the trajectory will continue upward.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think you hit the nail on the head, in your point that you made about like the squad not being like maybe good enough in terms of having game changers. And I think the way you explained that was really good to give that context. Like, I think this is a situation that would happen once in a season where 82 minutes, we're at one of the most difficult away grounds to go to in Europe. And we're chasing the game. We need a goal. We need to equalize. It's in those moments that you really know, I think, who you trust as a player. And yeah, I think yesterday, based on the evidence, I think there's quite a few players, like you mentioned, who are not really at the level that is required if you want to really challenge at the highest level. And yeah, I don't really have too much to add to what you said in terms of the squad not being good enough. But you did also briefly touch upon like Arteta's system and the tactical aspect of it. And there's a couple of things that annoy me a bit. The first thing is, look, a guy like Martinelli, I just look at him and I think, wow, this is a player that plays on instinct, okay? As most players from Brazil tend to do. But this guy is really special. His feel for the game, it's just incredible. And today I was just browsing Twitter and I saw one of the tweets that I had done, I think from 3 years ago or 2 years ago, was getting quote tweeted left, right, and center. It was this quote that Martinelli made after he scored against Leeds. This was in 2021 December. He scored a brace, and essentially what Martinelli said was like, Albert Stuivenberg questioned me the next day after I scored that I should have been like more wide, to basically stop the transition, but I was in the half space and I made the run forward from that half space to score the goal. I think as a manager, you should sometimes just let your players play. Not everything has to be that rigid. And for me, it annoys me because Saka and Martinelli, they're playing as the left back and the right back. They're doing everything, okay? And sometimes I just wish get these guys closer to goal and just let them express themselves, because they have, I still think we're only seeing like 60% of what they're truly capable of. I genuinely believe that. And even someone like Odegaard does so much work off the ball. Sometimes people criticize his final ball, but I think the reason his final ball is a bit poor is that he's doing so much of work And sometimes as a creative player to play that killer final pass, that should be the only thing that you're doing, right? But I also understand that football is a game that's collective. You need everyone across the pitch to contribute, and that's also a reason for our success. So I'm not proposing to take it all away. What I'm saying is, in certain moments, you should just loosen the shackles a bit, and let the players play. And yeah, I don't know if Arteta will ever change how he plays, but yeah, this is something that I would like to see, because in Jurgen Klopp's system, Martinelli is a 20 goal a season from open play type of player. He is that good. Klopp did not call him talent of the century for no reason. He did not become a bad player overnight. It's just the way we use him. So that is one thing. We also have a question from my good friend Nitin. He says, do you see yourself winning the Champions League in the next 3 years? If not, whom do you think Arteta should sign for that to happen? And I think that's a great question, to be honest, because it's very hard to say that sign this one player and you will win the Champions League, unless it's Mbappe or someone like that who probably is out of Arsenal's reach. So I think it's more a case of signing a few players, hoping that the current crop matures a bit. And then it's also a question of luck. Like Man City, Nitin is a big Man City fan, by the way. Like Man City were toiling away season after season to try and win the Champions League. They finally got to a Champions League final. I think it was in 2020, 2019. Yeah, 2020 it was in. And on the day, Chelsea just had a better game and they ended up winning. And Chelsea, I think, are a good example to follow, because they were not necessarily the best team in Europe in the seasons they won the Champions League. Um, but they had a good game plan on the day, and they were just a better team on the day. And I think for Arsenal, it comes down to like managing emotions, because we tend to get over emotional at times. We sometimes forget that, hey, let's be calm, let's apply ourselves. And yeah, I think maturity is something that you cannot just build overnight. I think it's a series of things that has to happen. Like winning the Champions League, unless you're Real Madrid, is an insanely hard achievement. Like even take someone like Pep Guardiola, who's like the most successful manager of this like generation. He's won what, 3 Champions League titles? If you look at it over a space of what, 15 years plus, he's won 3 Champions Leagues. It seems less, but that's also how hard it is to win it. Like he was at Bayern Munich for 3 seasons and he could not win the Champions League. It's just how it is. Like Bayern were the best team in Europe at the time, but yeah, it's one of those competitions where you just need to have a bit of luck on the day. You need to have God on your side on the day. But what you can do is, yes, obviously mature, sign the right players. And I think, as I mentioned before, winning the Champions League, you need to be really good on the counter attack, because teams like Arsenal, like Man City, that always keep the ball, they're a bit easy to plan against because of how predictable they are. So a team like Real Madrid, they have Vinicius, they have Rodrigo on the break. All it takes is for one through ball and they're in, because Arsenal and Man City, with the way they set up, will give you a chance. So yeah, it's about also, I think, tweaking your play style a bit. And I was criticizing Arteta's like tactics, and this brings me to the second criticism I have, which is tactical flexibility. Because you look at what Tuchel did yesterday, he switches to a back five. He switches to a back five. He becomes pragmatic. He does what he has to do to win on the day. And if you look at Arsenal's FA Cup winning run in 2020, where we beat City, we beat Chelsea, we did the same thing. We were a bit pragmatic. We sat back, we countered. And I think Arsenal have to tweak their approach a bit in Europe. We cannot play this way, be this predictable, and be successful in Europe. It's not possible. We have to change things a bit. So it's a few things that has to go. I think even the manager has to learn from these results and get that. But I do think that we will win the Champions League in the next 3 seasons. I actually have a feeling that we will do it. I just think, like, I just look at how far we've come as a club. Even 5 years ago, when I look at Arsenal, how We used to get bantered left, right, center. The progress we've made has been phenomenal. And I just think one of these seasons that it will click. It didn't happen this season, but I think it will click in the future. But in terms of the players that I would sign, I would look to sign Rafael Leao from AC Milan because I think he's a player that is built for the Champions League. I would look to sign a good striker. It could be Vlahovic, could be Sesko, somebody who's going to bury the chance that they get. And I would look to also bolster the midfield. I would look to sign Kimmich for the midfield, honestly. We need someone like that with the experience. You saw yesterday the intelligence that he brings on the football pitch and also some depth at the back. So I think it's a question of 2 to 3 signings that can give us a better shot. And then, after that, it's about turning on the day. But Sham, what do you make of it? Is that a player that you will look to bring in that can win us the Champions League? Or do you think it's hard to just say sign XYZ player and yeah.
It's funny. I got asked a question earlier today by this guy, and he was like, "What can we do to guarantee that we win the Champions League next season?" And I was like, my response was, "There's no way to guarantee winning things, right? There just isn't, right? Those are the margins. Look at Manchester City. Yeah, yesterday. Sorry, wow, feels like it was months ago. That's how grief works, anyway. But look at Manchester City. They won the treble last year. They were absolutely dominant, right? Lost at home penalty shootout to Real Madrid in the quarterfinals of the Champions League. That's, to be honest, not a great result for them, right? And it just kind of goes to show it's the margins are so thin, right? You mentioned how Guardiola didn't win the Champions League during the 3 seasons he was at Bayern. Took him like 8 tries with Manchester City as well to do it, right? Two of those were with Barca, and he had Messi for that. So
Yeah.
so it's just one of those things where you need the margins, you need just things to break your way. So in terms of whether or not I think we'll win the Champions League in the next 3 years, maybe. I think year 2 or year 3, and the reason I'm very hesitant about that because I'm not even worried about City really. It's Real Madrid I'm worried about in terms of beating them to a Champions League because they're going to get Mbappe. But Mbappe, it sounds like they're favorites for Alfonso Davies as well. They've been linked to Trent. If they get all three of those guys, then it
Also the
it's
heritage of the club, I think. Like they just
yeah,
know
and
how to know it.
yeah, they know how to do it. It's their meat and potatoes. So I think we can do it. I think the trajectory we're on, it's certainly within the range of outcomes. Um, knockout football just really comes down to luck and then taking your opportunities. So kind of with that in mind, the the more I think about it, the more I'm kind of into the Liao signing, right? Because that's top line talent. That's a guy who's going to win games for you. Um, but yeah, I just think we have to be really smart about our signings, and we have to bring in guys who are going to take matters into their own hands every once in a while. I actually do think we will sign Kimmich. Sorry, Kimmich. I think Kimmich is a very Arteta signing, to be quite honest, and I would love it because we're missing that world class expertise and experience. We're missing that brave mentality. We're missing someone who's going to come off the bench and give you potential game winning qualities, right? Or who will even start when you need him to. And I think that's Joshua Kimmich to a T. So um, yeah, we'll see what happens. I think Champions League pedigree is a very difficult thing to build, and this is our first step really towards getting any semblance of it. So I have faith that Arteta will figure it out, but it's going to take time and it's going to take a little bit of luck, and we'll see.
I also, I also think the good thing now is that we are in the Champions League. So I think the stock of the club is at an all-time high. I was reading
Yeah.
this post by Elliot Richardson. I don't know if all of you guys had the chance to see it, but it was a really beautiful post, and he's a really well connected guy in football. He was just speaking about how how all agents are like literally scrambling to try and get their clients to play for Arsenal. Like it's really lucrative at the moment to play for Arsenal. You're in London, you're part of this really young core of players. The project is improving season in, season out. A really up and coming young manager who's showing a lot of class, to be honest. So I think as a club, we have a lot of things going for us. And, I'm just thinking about it. So take even a guy like Kylian Mbappe for a second, okay? In terms of the teams that would be interested in for him, hypothetically, you would have Real Madrid in the La Liga, you know, and apart from Real Madrid, you could have Bayern Munich. But if Kylian Mbappe says, "Okay, I want to play in the Premier League," you know, I think the only team that might actually get Kylian Mbappe over Arsenal is maybe Man City because of Pep Guardiola and maybe because they're willing to pay his mammoth wages. But I think Arsenal are there. Like in terms of Europe's like top talents, we are there. Like Rafael Leao probably wants to come to Arsenal over any other team if he wants to leave Milan and he's looking to come to the Premier League. He probably wants Arsenal, and I think that's the thing that has changed, because you have to remember even 2 years ago we were in the Europa League, so the level of talent that we could sign was also a little bit lesser. This is the first season we got into the Champions League, and look what we do. We signed Declan Rice for 100 million, and Rice was a player that in any other season would have been like coveted by all the top teams in England. I think Sir Alex Ferguson, if he was still United's manager, and if United were at the top, Declan Rice is the type of player he would have signed. And he's exactly the type of player Arsenal would have missed out on when he was 18, and then we would see posts for the next 15 years speaking about how we missed out on this guy. But no, we went out there and we bought him at 100 million. That's a statement. And that's what we're going to do, I think, over the next 2 to 3 years. So I think we should just look at ourselves and look to keep improving. And yeah, ultimately, the dynamos will align, and I'm sure that we will win it at some point. Hopefully,
Yeah,
at least
yeah,
during our lifetime. But yeah,
yeah.
I'm completely on board with Mbappe. He's the guy, man. He solves the left wing issue and the center forward issue. And yeah, we
Look,
need a bit of
I
that.
I did that video, about a month ago now, talking about why Mbappe should pick Arsenal. So, just send that to him. Someone send that to him. But yeah, no, I mean, I agree. I think people are letting yesterday kind of affect their long-term image of the club, and it's absolutely the case that we're on really strong footing, right? Like you said, we beat Bayern and Manchester City to Declan Rice. We beat Bayern to like 4 or 5 different targets last summer. Um,
Just not on the
and
pitch.
yeah, just on the pitch, yeah.
Well, that's okay.
But
We take the transfer victories.
yeah, but and it's not the first time we've heard that, right? That players want to join Arsenal. Edu basically said as much a few months ago, where he said the phone was ringing off the hook with agents trying to pitch their players to him,
Kia
right?
Joorabchian was top of the list of the agents.
Get that get that man away from my club. But yeah, no, I'm very encouraged, right? I think it's silly when you talk about potential Arsenal targets now, and people are like, oh, he's too expensive. Oh, he wouldn't come. Oh, he's not interested. I think I think that feels really expanded for us at this point, right? I think you know I think most players would at least consider coming to Arsenal. Um, which is a vast improvement, like you said, from how it was a couple years ago. So, you know, reports are coming out that we have basically a similar budget to what we had last season. There was a report that came out this morning. I forget. It was Lucas something who reported it, but we made 90 million euros from being in the Champions League, from getting to the quarterfinals of it, which will undoubtedly also factor in to our transfer budget. So I think we're going to very much strengthen the squad. I think we're going to make some sales that also add to that budget, and I think we're going to see some, one or two big names, and then a couple more useful players come in, right? And yeah, I think it's a very interesting moment in the season because everyone wants to mourn, but also there's an opportunity for us to still go win something if things kind of fall in our favor. And then after that, I think we just get to sit back and enjoy the transfer links and watch the team get even better. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, yeah, exciting summer ahead. Really looking
Yeah,
forward to it actually. I think second season where we have Champions League football, I think the level of player that we can attract will be really good. So very excited. I think the club is keeping things under the wraps a bit. I know we had leaks today about interest in Isak and Olise, but Elliot Richardson again, who I really trust a lot on transfers, he's come out and said Isaac is not the primary target. And apparently, yeah, what the report also said on Olise was that it's the scouts that are interested. I don't know if the club is interested. So let's see what happens. But I think we have something interesting planned for the summer, and yeah, I'm quite excited to see what will unfold.
yeah, for sure. Well, I'm glad that we have managed to kind of end this on a happy note. But I know you had a few words that you wanted to say at the end of the pod as well. So floor is yours.
Yeah, I just wanted to pay a tribute to Angry Rantman, Abhardeep, who sadly passed away yesterday. He was someone that definitely inspired me a lot to start producing content coming from India, and being fearless and just speaking about football. I think he really inspired me to do what I do today. And I have spoken to him a few times. He was always really very encouraging, extremely positive. He's actually a really positive and delightful guy. So I'm really, really sad what happened to him. Thoughts go out to his family and friends, but I'm sure his legacy is going to live on forever. He was one of the most talented content creators I've ever seen. All he needed was a mobile, with that fan spinning in the background, just absolutely iconic. Brought so much of joy to people's lives. And yeah, I'm sure his legacy is going to go on forever. I was actually some months ago I was working, and there was a guy. I work in Hanover here in Germany, and one of my colleagues who's German, like locally from Hanover, he came and told me once randomly, there is no passion, there is no vision, there is no aggression. And I was like, wait, where did you hear this from? And he was like, Angry Rant Man. Can you imagine like the global reach that he had? That someone even in a town like Hanover in Germany, that people know who he is. Like it's so insane to think about it. It's like a guy who's just speaking about the things that he's passionate about, and I just really, really admire everything that he did. And yeah, I was really, really devastated actually over the last week to see what was happening to him. But yeah, I'm sure he's in a much better place now, and may his soul rest in peace. So, yep, I wanted to pay tribute to him on this podcast to end it. And yeah, I'm sure, as I mentioned, his legacy will always be there.
Yeah, yeah. No, he definitely was a trailblazer. I didn't watch much of his content, but yeah, that video I definitely watched a few times, and yeah,
Yeah,
man, like I said, the guy was a trailblazer, and that's kind of the dream with this content creation thing, right? Where you you're so good at it, and you reach enough people where some guy in a different continent is quoting you.
it's
So
insane. It's insane. Like,
yeah,
wow.
so rest in peace to him, and like you said, I hope he's in a better place, and yeah, thoughts go out to his family, and yeah, all the best to them. So we will call it there. Um, like we said, 6 games to go. Keep the faith, right? We just have to do our jobs and hope things fall into place. Again, it is disappointing to go out of the Champions League, but there's a quote that goes, "I don't lose. I either win or I learn." And that's how I like to think of Arsenal as well. So we'll leave it there, and we will hopefully be back next week to discuss a win away at Wolves, which is a very important game. And hopefully I'll be able to chat about that. Well, we'll probably do that early in the week because 9 days until a big day for me. So yeah, we'll do that early in the week, and we'll talk to you after the Wolves game. So until then, be a gooner, don't be a goon, and we will talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Maybe we'll have a good surprise for you.
Alright.